Hi friends, this is Patty Bennett. I am back with another edition of a My Digital Studio video tutorial for you. And today I'm going to show you how to make a blog header for your blog. I started with a blank 8.5 by 11 portrait layout of a blank page. And to get that, you click on the New Project Options, Multiple Output option, and then you choose the landscape page. I've already done that, so I'm just going to X out of that. So here's my blank page. That's what I started with. I'm actually going to work on this page. I've imported my finished blog header down here just so you can see what we're trying to go for down here. So the first thing I did, I worked from the background forward, is I clicked on background paper and I chose script and Dusty Durango, and I said OK because I want to fill the entire background page. That's what I started working on. Then my next step was to add the black and white designer paper from Night and Day. Now this was an additional download, so if you purchased this separately in October, you will find this under Designer Series Paper, Designer Kits, and then Night and Day. And I was using pattern number 1. Now I don't want it to fill my entire background, so I'll click Add as Page Layer. And this is one way that you can add designer paper to your background. I'm going to show you another way that's a little bit easier, but just in case you get to this spot and you need to resize your paper, I want you to know how to do that. If you just click and drag one of the handles, it's going to tell you that it might pixelate. And it does. It totally distorts the whole image. So you cannot resize designer paper just by dragging the box handles. What you need to do is double click on it and it brings up this page, which is a 12 by 12 piece of designer paper, just as it is when you would purchase it in a package. So what I'm going to do is move my box over and then make it a little larger. And I know that this whole thing is 12 inches wide back here, and I want mine to be somewhere around 9 or 10 inches wide. So I dragged it to approximately that, and then I click OK, and it gives me a bigger piece here to work with. So that's one way to resize your designer paper. Now an easier way to work with a different size piece of designer paper would be to click on Punches and choose any shape you want. I'm going to start with the square, and this is going to be to add our piece of script Dusty Durango on top. And what I'm doing is just resizing it so that I have a border around like a mat like this. Okay, and then I'm just going to say paper fill, script, Dusty Durango, OK, and it fills that with that piece without distorting anything and without trying to resize it. So there's two ways that you can add designer paper to your project. My next step was to add this piece that looks like vellum, and to do that I again added a square punch to my project over here. And then I filled it with white. But then over here, I changed the opacity so that it would lighten and it would look like vellum. So that's how I got that look. And then under the stamp icon, I chose Friends 24/7, and I put this image on there. Let's see if I'm going to need to resize it. Yeah, maybe a little bit. And then just put it in the center. I'm using my arrow keys, which of course you can't see, but that's how I'm shifting it over a little bit at a time. So that that was my stamp image. And then I used a stitching stamp. I don't know if you can see this right here around the border of that vellum piece. And that is really cool. It's under embellishments, rockabye elements, and it's down at the very bottom. It's the last one, and it's called Stitched 4. So I'm going to double click on that, and it's going to bring it in here onto my project, and then I put it over there in the upper left corner and I shrunk it. And I know that that makes the stitching a little bit smaller, but that was okay with me. I didn't mind if the stitching was a little bit smaller. So that gave me stitching around all four sides of my pretend piece of vellum. And then I added the brads, and you probably know already how to do that. That's at the very top of the embellishment list. And I put a black brad in each corner, and then I clicked on text so that I could add a text box for my name, Patty's Stamping Spot. And for that font, I downloaded a free font, and it's called Digs My Heart, and I like that one. I think it's really fun. And I chose a pretty big size to start with. Let's put that down on the second row. And then I did another box down here that looks like a piece of vellum. So again, same idea as the other box that we added. I added a punch, started with a square, and I sized it to the size that I wanted, filled it with white, and then changed the opacity so that it wasn't quite so bright. And I added my text in there and two more brads. And my last step was to add this medallion stamp, and that was another additional download that was available in October. I made the stamp white, and then I made it fairly opaque, excuse me, I made it fairly transparent so that you could see through it. Okay, in the interest of time, that's all I'm going to do on this part. I'm sure that you get the idea of how to keep layering and adding your text, and I added this cropped punch image in a different video, so if you didn't see that, you might want to tune into that previous video and you'll see how to do that. Then I opened this file, saved it in as a JPG, so export to JPG, and you go through those steps and save it on your hard drive. And then I opened that file in Photoshop, so it looked like this, and I used my crop tool to crop it. And you can do this in any photo editing software that you have. It doesn't have to be Photoshop. That's just happened to be what I like to use for cropping. And then I had to change the size, resize, image size. For my blog, it needs to be a width of 770 pixels. So I changed that and I saved it to my computer. And that's what gave me the size that I needed to upload to my blog. So then I had this image that was all cropped and ready to upload to my blog. I have TypePad for my blog. If you have a different provider like Blogspot or WordPress, they will have information for you on how wide you're going to need to make your finished banner or header. I think 770 is probably for my 2-column blog. The 3-column blog is probably a different size as well. So hopefully that was helpful to you, and I would love to hear from you if you have any other suggestions for things that you'd like to learn. Thanks. Bye-bye.